The judge laughed when he saw the teenager walk in wearing his father's oversized suit, but he wasn't ready for what happened next. Nobody expected the kid in the baggy charcoal suit to speak. He strode through the double doors of the Turner County Courthouse in Asheville, Georgia, like he'd done it before. The jacket didn't quite fit, sleeves too long, hiding most of his hands. His tie was slightly crooked. The briefcase he carried was scuffed, like it had been passed down through generations. But the way Jeremiah Dawson moved, calm, back straight, eyes forward, said he was here on business. The courtroom crowd turned. Whispers rippled. Who was this boy? A clerk's younger cousin? Someone's assistant? A kid wandering in off the street? Judge Harold Grayson looked up from his bench, reading glasses perched low on his nose. At first he said nothing, just smirked. It wasn't subtle, a smile that spoke without words, one that made you uneasy. Jeremiah didn't flinch. He walked straight to the defense table, opened his briefcase, and pulled out 3 neatly organized folders and a worn copy of the Georgia Code. He laid them out carefully like a surgeon arranging tools. Grayson finally spoke. "You lost, son?" "No, sir," Jeremiah said, voice steady. "I'm representing my brother, Ezekiel Dawson." The pause was heavy, like even the courtroom clock held its breath. Grayson blinked. Prosecutor Laura Bergman looked up from her notes, one eyebrow raised. Someone in the 3rd row stifled a laugh. Grayson leaned back in his chair. "Representing? You mean observing?" "No, sir. Representing." Jeremiah held up a document, notarized and signed. Ezekiel filed a motion for self-representation. Then he designated me, under Georgia's provisions for lay representation, to act as his advocate. Grayson's smirk widened. "Son, this isn't a mock trial. This is a criminal case." "I understand." "You're 16. "Yes, sir." "No license, no formal legal education?" "No, sir." Jeremiah glanced briefly at the gallery, then back to the judge. "But I've studied law for 2 years and read everything about my brother's case twice." The courtroom shifted. No more chuckles, just silence, tense, awkward silence. Grayson exhaled, slow and deliberate. "Well, let's see how long that confidence lasts." He turned to the prosecutor. "Ms. Bergman?" She looked uneasy. "If the paperwork's in order, it's legal. Odd, but legal." Grayson shook his head, eyeing his docket. "This is a preliminary hearing. We're here to determine if there's enough evidence for trial. If your brother wants you speaking for him, I won't stop you." Jeremiah didn't smile or move. He just said, "Yes, Your Honor," and sat. From the back row, Ezekiel watched silently. His hands were cuffed, orange jumpsuit creased at the collar, but his eyes held something calm, something proud. The clerk called the case, State of Georgia versus Ezekiel Dawson. The room reset. Laura Bergman stood, laying out the charges: burglary, resisting arrest, possession of stolen property. "It's a simple case," she said. "Mr. Dawson was caught fleeing a home, carrying electronics in his car. The arresting officer identified him on the scene. No mention of fingerprints, no mention of an alibi, no mention of the anonymous tip that led to Ezekiel's stop." Grayson nodded. It felt fast, too fast. Then Jeremiah stood calmly. "Your Honor, may I cross-examine the officer?" Surprise flickered across Grayson's face. "You may." The officer approached. Officer Mark Reynolds, 47, built like a linebacker with a voice made for radio, looked at Jeremiah like he was a science experiment. "State your name for the record," Jeremiah said. "You serious?" "Please state it." A few people in the back tensed. Jeremiah's tone wasn't sharp, just different, like he wasn't asking but conducting. Reynolds, Mark Reynolds. And you testified you saw my brother inside a car with stolen property. Yep, flat-screen TV in the back seat, 2 laptops. I stopped him after the tip came in. Right, that tip. Did you log it? No. You said he fled. He tried. I stopped him. Jeremiah opened a folder. Then how do you explain this? He held up a photo. Ezekiel face down, cuffed, with knees on his back, time stamped 5 minutes before the official vehicle stop. The courtroom stirred. Reynolds blinked. Grayson leaned forward. Where'd you get that? Grayson asked. Neighbor's security camera, Jeremiah said. The arrest happened before the stop. That's an unlawful seizure. And just like that, the temperature changed. But what happened next made the entire courtroom forget they were watching a teenager. The silence didn't last. It cracked when Officer Reynolds muttered, "Guess I got the timing wrong." Jeremiah didn't blink. So your official report is inaccurate. Your body cam was off, and you didn't log the anonymous tip, Grayson cut in. Let's keep it respectful, Mr. Dawson. Jeremiah nodded. Of course, Your Honor, just trying to get to the truth. People shifted in their seats. Whispers swept through like wind. Some who came expecting a show sat straighter. This wasn't funny anymore. From the defense table, Jeremiah picked up a second file. I'd also like to submit an affidavit from Ms. Clara Thompson, the homeowner allegedly burglarized. Grayson glanced at the document. You got her to sign this yourself? Yes, sir. Yesterday afternoon. And what's she say? She says nothing was taken. She found her TV where she left it. Door was locked. No signs of a break-in. Bergman shot up. Your Honor, this wasn't in discovery. Jeremiah didn't miss a beat. The police didn't interview her. I did. Grayson raised an eyebrow. How'd you get her to talk to you? I asked, Jeremiah said. Politely. A few laughs broke out, not at Jeremiah, but with him. Grayson reviewed the affidavit. She confirms Ezekiel wasn't at her house. Says she didn't see him that day. Learned about the arrest from the local paper. Grayson's eyes narrowed. His smirk was gone. He was thinking now. The courtroom door creaked. A latecomer, Mr. Tate, the town's unofficial watchdog, retired, nosy, always with a notepad, whispered to someone in the back. What's going on? Some kid's defending his brother, a woman replied. He's killing it. Earlier that morning, Jeremiah had stood on the courthouse's cracked sidewalk with his brother's lawyer, former lawyer, near a rusty bike rack. The man, Vernon Hayes, looked at him like he was a math problem he hadn't studied for. You can't do this, kid, Hayes said. Court's not a school project. I know, Jeremiah said calmly, but you don't believe my brother. I do. Faith doesn't win trials. No, but truth might. Hayes shook his head, muttered about watching too many movies, and walked off. Now, in the courtroom, Jeremiah was making up for every hour spent self-studying, late nights at the Asheville Public Library, listening to lecture recordings on his cracked phone, watching old trials on YouTube, reading used law books bought for $5 each at a thrift store in Macon. No degree, but he had facts. No courtroom experience, but he had instinct. And right now, he had momentum. Grayson cleared his throat. Let me get this straight. The officer's arrest timeline is wrong. The alleged victim denies anything was stolen. No evidence of a break-in. And you, Mr. Dawson, dug this up yourself? Jeremiah looked at his brother, then back at the judge. I had to. No one else did. Heavy pause. Grayson leaned back. No smirk, just a crease between his brows. You said you're 16? Yes. Grayson sighed through his nose like he didn't want to say what came next. Well, so far you're better prepared than half the licensed attorneys who stand before me. Gasps, a few murmurs. Bergman crossed her arms, not smiling. Jeremiah's face stayed neutral, but his heart pounded. Not from nerves, from focus. Every moment mattered. Every word mattered. He stepped back to the table, stacked his folders neatly, and whispered something only Ezekiel could hear. "You good?" Ezekiel nodded. "You're doing better than I ever could have." Jeremiah gave a slight smirk, eyes forward. "Just wait." Because if they thought the kid in the oversized suit was done, they were about to learn how wrong they were. By the time Jeremiah returned for the second round of questions, it was obvious. The room had changed. People weren't staring at the suit anymore. They were watching him, how he spoke, how he never raised his voice, never stumbled, never looked unsure. Not once. Jeremiah flipped open his notebook, pages scrawled with handwriting and dog-eared corners. It was like he saw something. He turned back to Officer Reynolds. "Officer, you testified you found 2 laptops in the car. Do you have serial numbers for those items?" "No," Reynolds said. "They were logged after the fact." "By whom?" "Property Division." "Can you confirm they were reported stolen?" "I assume so." "You assume?" Jeremiah pressed. Reynolds hesitated. "Well, that's what I was told." Jeremiah stepped aside, grabbing another paper. "Because according to a report from an electronics store 3 blocks from my house, where those laptops were purchased, my brother bought them 2 days earlier with his own debit card." He held up a receipt. Reynolds stared. Bergman objected. "Your Honor, this wasn't provided in discovery." "You didn't ask," Jeremiah countered, holding her gaze. "Because you assumed he was guilty." Grayson raised a hand. "Enough. Let me see that document." Jeremiah walked it over, calm and sure. Grayson adjusted his glasses. No emotion showed, but something flickered in his eyes. Bergman sat slowly. Someone in the 3rd row whispered, "This kid came with receipts." But Jeremiah wasn't done. "I'd like to call my next witness, Mr. Curtis Lyle." A man in his late 30s stood from the back, goatee, work boots, faded mechanic's shirt. He raised his hand and approached the stand. Grayson looked surprised. "Was this witness disclosed?" "No, sir, but he's relevant. I can explain." Grayson sighed. "Make it quick." Jeremiah turned to Curtis. "Can you tell the court about your relationship with Officer Reynolds?" Curtis shifted, glancing at the officer. "He's my cousin." "Did he talk to you the night Ezekiel Dawson was arrested?" "Yeah." "What did he say?" "Objection." Bergman stood. "Hearsay." "It goes to motive, Your Honor," Jeremiah argued. "Let me finish." Grayson leaned forward. "I'll allow it for now." Curtis cleared his throat. "He said he finally got him. Said he was tired of seeing those Dawson boys walking around like they owned the place. Said Ezekiel thought he was slick with the system but wasn't smart enough to outwit a badge." Gasps, sharp and audible. Grayson's face darkened. Bergman scribbled furiously. Jeremiah stepped closer to the stand, voice quieter. "Did he say anything about setting him up?" Curtis swallowed. He said, "1 anonymous call's all it takes in this town. Who they gonna believe? Me or some loudmouth kid?" Ezekiel closed his eyes slowly. The courtroom went silent. Jeremiah turned to the judge. "Your Honor, this shows not just a pattern of misconduct, but a personal bias that directly influenced the arrest and investigation." Grayson leaned back, his face betraying a desire to argue but no words to wield. Jeremiah continued, "If we're calling this justice, we need to stop pretending it starts with a uniform. It starts with truth. My brother's not perfect, but he didn't do what he's accused of, and everything presented today proves it." Grayson looked at Bergman. "Any rebuttal?" She hesitated. I'd need time to verify these new claims and evidence. Jeremiah was ready. You can take time, but every day he spends in that cell is a day stolen from a man who hasn't even had a chance to be heard. Grayson didn't respond immediately. He just stared at Jeremiah like he was seeing through him and, maybe for the first time, seeing him clearly. But the hearing was far from over, and Jeremiah had one more move to stun everyone in the room. Grayson called a 10-minute recess, but nobody left. Not really. Some stepped into the hall, but their eyes stayed glued to the courtroom like gravity held them there. Even the janitor, who usually swept the benches at lunch, leaned on his broom and lingered by the door. Inside, Jeremiah sat alone at the defense table, calmly sorting papers. No lawyer hovering, no team whispering in his ear. Just him, a stack of folders and a beat-up briefcase with a broken clasp. Across the room, Bergman leaned toward Officer Reynolds, whispering something low and sharp. Reynolds didn't look up, just stared ahead like a man caught playing with matches who burned more than he meant to. Grayson stayed at the bench, writing something with slow, careful strokes. He looked older now, or maybe just exposed, the look of a man whose self-told story was starting to crumble. 10 minutes passed. Back on the record, Grayson said firmly, tapping his gavel. Mr. Dawson, you may proceed with remaining witnesses or statements. Jeremiah stood. He didn't rush. He took a breath, set one final document before him, and looked straight at the judge. No more witnesses, Your Honor. Just a question for the court. Grayson's chin lifted slightly. Go ahead. Jeremiah stepped forward. What happens when the system makes a mistake and nobody speaks up? The judge didn't answer. Jeremiah continued. What happens when someone's arrested not for what they did, but for who people think they are? The room was still. I've read a lot of case law, Your Honor, more than most people my age. I've also read your rulings. Since 2005, you've sentenced people like my brother to 10 years for first-time offenses. You've denied mistrial motions for insufficient grounds. But I read one case from 2011, State versus Hargrove. Remember it? Grayson's face twitched faintly. Of course, Jeremiah nodded. Then you recall the witness who recanted, the missing dashcam footage. You let it go to trial anyway, and that man was convicted. Grayson cut in. That case was reviewed and closed. Jeremiah didn't back down. It was overturned 4 years later after the man lost his family, his job, everything. Bergman stood. Your Honor, is this a cross-examination or a lecture? Grayson didn't stop her. He just looked at Jeremiah. It's not about revenge, Jeremiah said. It's about accountability. He turned to the gallery. How many people in this room know someone locked up for something they didn't do? Hands rose quietly, one by one. Grayson's jaw tightened. You asked me earlier if I knew what I was doing, Jeremiah said. I do. I know exactly what I'm doing. I'm standing up for my brother because no one else will, not even you. The words landed heavy, not loud, but heavy. Grayson adjusted his robe, looked down, and finally said, Court will take a brief recess. I'll issue a ruling within the hour. Gavel down, he stood and exited through the side door, but not before one last glance at Jeremiah. No smirk, no sarcasm, just a face that looked cracked open. Jeremiah sat slowly. He didn't speak. Ezekiel leaned forward and whispered, You okay? Jeremiah didn't look back. Think I've finally got him to listen. Someone in the gallery muttered, Don't know who raised that kid, but they did something right. Outside, clouds gathered. The light in the courthouse windows dimmed, casting soft shadows across the room. But Jeremiah looked brighter than ever. The verdict was still pending, though, and one sentence from the judge could unravel it all. The hour felt like forever. The courtroom's hum settled into an odd silence, not tense, not relaxed, just waiting. Jeremiah sat alone, elbows on the table, hands clasped, eyes fixed on the door. He didn't check his phone, didn't fidget, just waited. Across from him, Ezekiel sat taller now. The cuffs were off his wrists by court order, a small gesture, but it meant something. At 2:03 p.m., Grayson returned, robe trailing slightly, face unreadable. He sat, shuffled papers, then looked up. This hearing is now resumed. My ruling will be delivered orally and entered into the record. The air thinned. Having reviewed the evidence, some of it admittedly unexpected, the court finds the prosecution has not established sufficient grounds to proceed to trial. Gasps. One person clapped, quickly hushed. Grayson continued, voice flatter than usual. The charges against Ezekiel Dawson are hereby dismissed with prejudice. You could have heard a pin drop. Then it all happened at once. Shoulders dropped. Murmurs grew. A quiet sob came from the back. Ezekiel looked at Jeremiah. Just looked. His mouth opened, then closed. Grayson tapped the gavel once more. Mr. Dawson is free to go. Bergman didn't stand. She sat rigid, biting the inside of her cheek. Reynolds stood and left without a word. And Jeremiah didn't jump up or raise a fist. He just stood slowly, gathered his notes, and packed them back into the worn briefcase like it was any other school day. Grayson stayed at the bench, watching. Then he did something no one expected. He cleared his throat. Mr. Dawson, could you approach the bench? Jeremiah walked forward. The courtroom held its breath. Grayson leaned in slightly, voice low enough for only a few to hear. You made me look in a mirror I've avoided for a long time. Jeremiah didn't smile. That wasn't the goal, sir. I just wanted my brother back. Grayson nodded. Well, you've got him, and you may have changed more than you know. He paused, like he wanted to say more but didn't know how. Then he added, Don't stop. Jeremiah stepped back, saying nothing. As Grayson stood and disappeared through the paneled door, people started clapping, quietly but with weight. The kind of applause that means something. A man in the back shouted, That kid just made Asheville history. Jeremiah walked to Ezekiel, now uncuffed, and handed him his hoodie and wallet. They stood face to face, silent at first. Then Ezekiel shook his head, blinking back heat in his eyes. You did the impossible. Jeremiah shrugged, fighting a smile. Wasn't impossible, just ignored. They walked out of the courtroom side by side, the crowd parting like water. Some nodded, some just stared. An elderly woman whispered, Lord, let that boy go far. Outside, the sun returned. Across the street, a local reporter set up a microphone. But Jeremiah kept walking, down the courthouse steps, past the news van, along the cracked sidewalk where his bike was still chained to a rack. Ezekiel laughed quietly. You really rode a bike to court? Gas money ain't free, Jeremiah said, grinning. They both laughed. But there was one more person Jeremiah needed to see, someone who never set foot in the courtroom but made it all possible. Gravel crunched softly under his shoes as he crossed the lot behind the courthouse. His suit jacket flapped in the breeze, tie now looser. He wasn't rushing. He just needed to get there. A small brick building sat at the corner of Main and Elm. A faded sign, a rusty mailbox, the Asheville Public Library. He pushed the door open, stepping into the smell of old pages and worn carpet. Behind the desk was Ms. Evelyn Carter, early 60s, glasses held together with tape, hair in a slightly lopsided bun. She looked up from a crossword. Shouldn't you be in school? She asked, a teasing smirk. Jeremiah smiled. Kinda was. She studied him, then squinted. Wait, don't tell me. You did it." He nodded slowly. Her face broke into a grin. "I knew it. I knew it. Watching you sit in that corner every day like those books owed you money." "They kinda did," Jeremiah said, chuckling. She stood, came around the desk, and pulled him into a hug that smelled of peppermint gum and old bookmarks. "I'm proud of you," she said softly. "Don't let this town dim your light. You hear me?" "I hear you." They stood there a moment longer before Jeremiah glanced at the familiar table in the corner. He'd sat in that same spot for months, earbuds in, notebook out, reading cases while the world moved around him. He walked over, ran a hand across the scratched surface. Ms. Carter watched from the desk. "What's next?" Jeremiah looked out the window where Ezekiel waited on the sidewalk, leaning against the bike, arms crossed, sun warming his face. "I don't know," Jeremiah said, "but I'm not done." That day, Asheville started seeing Jeremiah Dawson differently. Some still whispered, some stared, but most said his name with a pause, like it meant something. 3 weeks later, the local paper ran a story. Teen prodigy frees brother in court stunner. It wasn't quite accurate, but the message stuck. Officer Reynolds quietly took early retirement. Bergman was reassigned to a less prominent circuit, and Judge Grayson started acting differently. Fewer smirks, more listening. At the next town meeting, when a teenager pitched a local education fund for kids who couldn't afford test prep or tutors, Grayson stood beside him. No robe, just a man trying to do better. As for Jeremiah, he didn't become famous overnight. No scholarships rained down. Law school offers didn't flood in, but he kept studying, kept showing up. Every week he returned to the library, sometimes with younger kids sitting nearby, flipping through the same books he once pored over. Because Jeremiah didn't win just for his brother. He won for every kid told, "Not yet," "You're too young," or "This isn't for you." He didn't wait for permission, he prepared. And when the moment came, he walked in, head high, in an oversized suit, briefcase in hand, and proved genius doesn't come from age, title, or what people expect. It's about truth and the courage to speak it, even when no one's listening. Sometimes one person refusing to stay silent is enough. So if you believe in something, stand up, speak out, and don't let anyone's doubts define your future. If this story moved you, share it with someone who needs it. And never forget, your voice can change everything.